This is the Bevo Buckets podcast on the Burn Orange Sports Network. I'm Will Iger here with Ryan Hopper and our new third colleague, Seth Berger. Seth, great to have you on for the semester. What's going on, man?
Thanks, Will. It's a pleasure to be here, join you guys. I've seen some of your work, and it's impressive. I know your work from class also impressive. So good to be here. I'm excited to talk some Texas hoops, and I can't wait for this semester.
Well, it's great to have you on. It was definitely an interesting week to start working on the Bevo Buckets podcast. A lot of ups and downs for the Texas Longhorns this week, and it started with a victory over the Oklahoma Sooners, 77 to 73 last Wednesday, and a game that saw this Texas team lead by as much as 23 points, but that lead quickly dwindled down the second half of the round. 13 minutes left, 12, 13 minutes left, I believe, where Jeremiah Fears, Jalen Moore, and company caught fire. Ryan, overall thoughts on at least, Texas' first win in conference play, but it was not a pretty win to say the least.
I mean, yeah, you can say that the team made history, first SEC men's basketball win in history, but and boy did they need it. It was kind of a must-win game for each team. They each started 0-3. Texas got it done, but man, if you went upstairs to get like make yourself like some dinner or something and you came back down, the game was unrecognizable. Like you said, 23-point lead completely collapsed, multiple turnovers, lots of ISO ball. That's a seems to be a common theme with these Texas games down the stretch. It's very frustrating. Trey Johnson would dribble down to the baseline and get himself into a trap. That happened at least three times. Very, very concerning. I wrote in our game notes that I was taking watching the game that this could be a season-ending collapse if the full collapse had happened. I mean, that could have just mentally destroyed this team being up that much. And they did almost everything they could to blow the game, but thankfully, Will, they did not.
Seth, any thoughts on this one?
Crucial, as Ryan said. I mean, that would have, if you blow this one, that really stings. I mean, just from a morale perspective, when you start looking at the standings, you see yourself 0-4 at the bottom of the toughest basketball conference in recent history. Whenever you can get a win, any game, I mean, they're all going to be absolute wars. And this one was a winnable game. I mean, they haven't lost in Norman now in the last six times, and crucial for the Horns to hold on. It almost felt maybe this is just the pessimistic Texas fan in me, but it felt like when they went up big going into the half, it's like, well, we got a lot of time left. I'd almost rather them be up 12 than 20 right now. And sure enough, Oklahoma made a run. And the frustrating thing is you guys have known when teams go on runs against Texas, it's not like they start going ballistic from three. It's like a lot of the times they'll find an easy basket to hoop. They'll do a little seal, run it layup. And I think a lot of it goes back to this Texas team is not a big team. They're not a physical team. Every time you see Caden Shedrick bumping around with some of these monsters in the SEC, he ends up falling on his bum. So at some point, you gotta in this conference, you gotta man up, you gotta D up, you gotta play ball.
100%, Seth. And you talk about good. You talk about Kane Shedrick down low. Jalen Moore was 8 for 8 in the second half for the Oklahoma Sooners. He played the whole second half for them. And more importantly, he shot 5 attempts from three this game. That was tied for his most all season. And he was 3 for 5 from three. So he wasn't just dominating from inside the paint, he was dominated from outside too. And then he got to the free throw line a lot in this one, fellas. And this size issue for the Longhorns is a reoccurring theme that we've seen in past years. That being said, a win is a win, and it was a great performance from Jordan Pope. It seems like he's just getting better and better as this season's gone on. What have you guys liked from Pope as Texas started conference play early here in January?
I mean, it just feels like that he's become more of the guard that he was at Oregon State, and he's adjusted to his role here a lot better since arriving in the portal. But and it feels like RT, I think it was reported, Will, that RT had given him the green light after one of the early season losses. And I think that showed in those 7 or 8 games since then. He had really come along a long way, scoring about 20 a game. And then they're hyping him up with the Florida broadcast before that game. And then he comes into that, doesn't hit a single shot from the field, 0 for 9, I believe, 0 for 3 from three, 2 points total. It just felt like the momentum was really building for him, and now it's just been extinguished back to square one. We'll see what happens against Mizzou. I know I kind of put us further into the podcast than we like anticipated there, but I like what I'm seeing. He's definitely adjusted, but now it's comes down to can he put this Florida performance behind him and not have Julian Larry stealing his minutes once again, like at the beginning of the season.
I think, yeah, you look at this team, like you said, he's kind of become a little bit more of what he was at Oregon State. You look at this Texas team, they rank 274th in minutes continuity, 20% of the minutes basically returning. So everybody's figuring out a new role. And even in a state of college basketball where the transfer portal is paramount, I mean, that's a really low percentage for minutes returning. So everybody's figuring out their role. It's a new team. There's no question there's talent on this roster, but I think beyond figuring out his role, I think it seems like he's been a little bit more assertive with the ball at times in the non-conference. I don't want to say he looked lost, but as you're figuring out pieces of the puzzle and you see Trey Johnson passing half court and he's basically in range, and at times, maybe were the best shots that he was taking, and he gets bailed because he's absurdly talented. I think now you see him getting comfortable, but yeah, obviously, let's also put it in perspective. This rough game at Florida, it's an absolute gauntlet Texas just had. You played four top 20 Ken Palm teams. You played four top 10 to 15 AP poll teams. They played poorly in a couple of them. They took Auburn. I mean, Auburn, the score doesn't fully tell the story of what that game was. Tennessee was neck and neck throughout. And A&M, you put together one really good half. In Oklahoma, you put together one really good half and did just enough to hold on the road for your first quad one win. So we need to put that in perspective. But Jordan Pope, if he keeps staying assertive, trusting himself, trusting his team, they start playing a little bit more offensive rhythm than just a little Trey Johnson ISO ball. There's potential for this team.
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that Trey Johnson's production is teetering. It's not getting worse necessarily, or he's not getting up less attempts. He's not scoring as efficiently. And Jordan Pope's role on this Texas team is increasing as the year goes on. I don't think that's the worst thing for this Texas Longhorns basketball team, but definitely something to note moving forward. And I look at Jordan Pope, he 27 points against OU on Wednesday night, only missed 8 shots from the field, and 7 of those 8 shots were from behind the range. Like, we know what Jordan Pope is capable from mid-range, from that area around the elbow, in between really 3-point line and free throw. We know what he's capable there. So if he can just find his spots more, I think that should eventually open up more for Trey Johnson. Again, both players were cold against Florida, but that's also partially because of their three-headed monster in the backcourt that we saw from the Gators. So moving on, I guess talking about this annihilation of this Texas Longhorns basketball team by the Florida Gators. Seth, as you mentioned, it's been a gauntlet for the last 2 weeks for the Longhorns. I'm sure that played into this 84-60 win for the Gators. What went wrong here for Texas? Was it just a pure on, talent disadvantage for the Longhorns? Was it a little bit of everything? They lacked size, they lacked defense against the Florida guards. What really happened here against Florida?
I mean, I would just say that one, I thought they were rattled by a very tough home environment. Nobody has gone and won in the swamp this year except for the gauntlet continues. Texas's next opponent, the Missouri Tigers. Um, they have arguably the best starting five in the country. That's why Florida is as good as they are. They're not very deep, but they're starting five. They've got the three-headed monster in the backcourt. Elijah Martin, I believe, gave Texas 25 in that game. Um, it came down also to rebounding. Florida isn't like exceptionally big, but it just felt like their bigs were able to get rebounds. You're looking at Thomas Haug, hitting the glass. Alex Condon had a double-double with 11 and 12. He used his size effectively. Um, and Texas was in that game like a lot of these losses until they weren't. Big Florida run, I believe it was a 15 to nothing run, and they were always able to keep Texas at arm's length. And you mentioned earlier, you're like, oh, he's got to find his spots. You were referring to Jordan Pope. I think you could say that about a lot of these offensive players in Texas rotation. You know how you find your spots? You have consistent offensive sets that you run, so you have a general idea of where your spots are, and then you can practice those shots and practice. Oh, on this play, I have potentially open three from the elbow. Let me get up 25 extra shots from the elbow in practice. My old coach would call them game shots. You just got to keep it simple for these guys. ISO ball, you don't know what you're going to do sometimes until a second before you do it. And I think that just really kills Texas in these tough road environments where you need to out execute your opponent.
This Florida team, you talk about them having an elite starting five and not a lot of depth. It gives me some vibes of a couple years back Creighton team that ended up going to the Elite Eight. They had big inside presence like Condon does with Florida. They had Ryan Kalkbrenner, and then they had Baylor Shireman who could shoot the crap out of it. And then you had guards, you had Ryan Nemhard bringing the ball up the floor, and then Trey Alexander at the two, and then Kaluma. So this Florida team, this Creighton team, kind of in my head similar, where you have an elite starting five, a team in a tough conference. The Big East was great that year, and you go into the swamp, really tough place to play. They're reinvigorated. You know, they had a few down years post Billy Donovan. Now they're back after the Mike White era, and you're going in there and they're hungry because they're coming off a loss to Mizzou at home. That's a tough time to play a team when they're coming up a game that they should have absolutely won. You go in there, you've survived Oklahoma. It's interesting because you have a great first half, and then the second half, the wheels kind of fall off. You do enough to hold on, beat your rival, but you're not feeling great, even though you should be celebrating your first SEC win. And again, they come out, play a pretty solid first half or first half of the first half, like they did against A&M on the road, and then Florida makes the adjustments, and the wheels just completely fall off. It's aggravating to watch. It's got to be aggravating for those guys in the locker room, and at some point the whole staff's got to sit down, the players got to sit down, and you got to figure something out because it doesn't get a whole lot easier throughout the rest of the SEC.
No, it does not, Seth. And you talk about the Texas Longhorns spiraling out of control this past Saturday. They started off actually playing pretty well against the Gators. They were hitting on all cylinders offensively, playing good defense. And then Florida just went on a mean 15-0 run in the middle of the first half. And that was the difference maker. That was it. And in that 15-0 run, you saw a stagnant offense by Texas. You talked about the easy buckets that OU was able to get against us, or against Texas, sorry, in the second half. You saw the same thing, Florida, with a ton of pull-up threes from those three guards and a lack of, Kane Shedrick, lack of pick and roll defense, just kind of letting them step right into it. You don't see Trey Johnson or Tremont Mark get those type of shots against Florida, against any of this other top competition in the SEC. And if offensively Texas isn't going to get it going, then it seems like defense is going to fall back as well. So moving forward in the SEC, as it gets tougher and tougher, Texas is going to have to learn how to play against these more competitive, experienced teams like Florida. And they'll see one tomorrow night against Missouri, led by Mark Mitchell, led by SEC Player of the Week, Caleb Grill, playing his 6th year in college. He's bounced around a bunch in college. In the last couple of games, he's been balling for the Tigers. 17 against Arkansas, 22 against Florida, only 13 against Vanderbilt. But that was all in last week's work. And it does not get any easier. So moving on this week. First, Missouri tomorrow night. No school for Longhorn students. Big snow day. If all goes well, maybe the Burn Orange Sports Network We'll have the game tomorrow night. We'll keep you updated on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. But going in tomorrow night against Missouri, lost 3 games. Memphis, at Auburn, and home against Illinois. Second best record in the SEC, or tied for second best at 4-1. What did the Longhorns need to do to pull off an upset against 22 ranked Missouri Tigers?
I mean, I'll just say that for almost any conference game, any game against a decent opponent, box out. All five guys need to be hitting the defensive glass. Will we sound like a broken record at times? Because this team is just not very big. UF outscored them 44-20 in the paint. You can't have that when they already are offensively a little bit better than you in the backcourt. You can't give them all these second chance opportunities. You can't give Mizzou that. You can't give A&M that. One quick bow on the UF game. We've been hoping for a sign of another big man that could contribute to this rotation. We thought it might be Kent, Jason Kent, after the injury. He hasn't really done much. But Big Z, Zarek Yema, double-double in 25 minutes off the bench. Can we see some more of that, Big Z? They might be lying on his height. I think 6'9" on his listing is generous. I think he's probably about 6'7", with some junk in his trunk. However, he can get some boards. He can use that big body. They could really use him. He chimed in with 3 assists as well. It is not going to be easy. You are back on your home floor. Texas is a slight favorite. For some reason, the analytics have Texas with a 71% chance of winning. I don't particularly agree with that. However, they could squeak this one out, especially if, like late in the Oklahoma game, they get a couple of these contested shots from Trey Johnson to get a lucky shooter's roll.
Sorry to hop in, Seth, but we've been fans of Big Z all year. What stands out to us most about Big Z that honestly his Texas team needs physicality inside. Like you can tell immediately he makes a difference inside the paint, verticality on defense. And like worst case scenario, if you have to switch that pick and roll, I'm taking the matchup with him and a star guard over Kane Shedrick. I think because of he's smaller than Caden, that's 6'7". I think he can move his feet better on the perimeter, and I think he's done a better job at protecting the rim despite being more undersized. But Seth, go ahead with this Missouri kind of game preview.
Yeah, so I will say the one thing, the couple things I do like for Texas in this matchup is Texas, as we mentioned, is a weak offensive rebounding team. Missouri is also a weak team when it comes to giving up offensive rebounds. They've struggled inside Trent Pierce at center, 6'10", 215, 220. You can get inside him. Shedrick has some size on him, or at least comparable. I mean, he might not use it, we've seen, but that's something to keep an eye on. And another thing, Texas has shot the ball from three pretty well on the year, at least 3-point percentage, 38.1%. Missouri is one of the worst, excuse me, Missouri is 227th in the country on 3-point percentage, giving up 34.5% per game. And another area where they struggle, I said two, but here's a third one on the house. They do a really poor job of preventing teams from getting to the free throw line. So we talked about Jordan Pope being assertive, getting downhill. If he can do that against Missouri, it could be a good night for the Horns because they do give up a lot of free throws. So these are kind of the key success. Obviously, Caden Shedrick, it's going to be a big night for him. This is a game when he's not going to be overpowered by another center. Could be huge for confidence because if Texas is going to go anywhere in this SEC, they're going to need help down low. This conference is physical. It's athletic. It's the best basketball conference since probably the old Big East. This is a game you got to win, especially with a team like Texas sitting on the bubble. I know it's early to start looking at the bubble, but you got to start racking up wins because, as we mentioned, it's not getting easier.
No, it is not. In this SEC conference, they have a lot of teams in this top 25. I mean, you talk about Missouri, Mississippi State, A&M, Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, and obviously Auburn number one.
And Ole
That's
Miss. It's hard to keep
and
track
Ole
of all
Miss.
of them. It's
And
it's
Ole Miss.
like it's really like when are you going to play someone not ranked? Georgia's been ranked at times. Vanderbilt's frisky. Arkansas has Coach Cal. Is there an easy win in this conference? I guess LSU would have to be it. Is really your only easy game?
Right, an LSU team who I believe Texas does not face this year. Oh, sorry, they do. They play on the road at LSU to start the month. But outside of that road matchup against LSU, not a lot of easy matchups for this Texas team, and they play another hard team on Saturday at home. Lone Star rivalry. Texas will host Texas A&M and look to get revenge on Buzz Williams and company after an 80-60 loss in College Station 2 weeks ago. I think around 2 weeks ago, where
Yep.
they got out physicaled, out muscled. I've talked to both of you about this game and what went wrong the first time around. Well, this time Texas looks to get revenge, and I think it's a great thing that this team lost and lost the way they did against A&M a couple weeks ago. And I think they'll be primed for a great matchup against them on Saturday. Hopefully, another game that will be on the Burn Orange Sports Network. Maybe seeing Ryan Hopper on color commentary or play-by-play with Zach Davis. Guys, how we match up against this Aggie team after just playing them first time around?
Not well, if I had to be blunt. I mean, Wade Taylor's back.
Yep.
And you guys saw that first game. Again, another half. Texas played a good first half. While they did take a lot of mediocre shot, a lot of, as the analytics would say, bad shots that went in. And
Mhm.
then the second half, Texas A&M shoved Texas in a locker, took their lunch money. I mean, it was a blowout. You saw Texas A&M hustling, diving on the floor, backing them down, setting back screens for easy layups. This is a tough matchup for Texas because well, first off, Wade Taylor's back and he's the engine of that team. A&M likes to put Zerk Phelps in a lot of one-on-one situations and just let him go to work. And as we've mentioned, Texas being a poor offensive rebounding team and Texas A&M being an elite defensive unit. I don't love the matchup. It's a home game. I'm sure Texas can be fired up because of the way the last one went. But to me, not a huge fan of this matchup for the Horns.
I can't say that I am either. I mean, you look at what the Aggies have done since the Texas win. They got a gutsy win on the road in Norman, won by two without Wade Taylor. They kept Bama close, lost by 6 at home to Bama. Went to Rupp Arena, kept it pretty close there, lost by 12, and then beat a pretty poor LSU Tigers team by 11. They can stay with anybody because their defense. They can smother bad teams because of their defense, kind of like they smothered Texas in that second half. And they're 14-4 overall record, good conference record, and they're shooting 43% from the field and 30.5% from three as a team. I mean, that does not bode well for Texas because that means they can get boards and second chance opportunities against teams that aren't in the bottom two in defensive rebounding in the SEC. Like they said on the Oklahoma broadcast, does Oklahoma have enough, width and strength inside for defensive rebounding? Because offensive rebounding, you can have guys like Kaluma who know how to read the ball off the rim and react and get there. Defensive rebounding is more about want to and size. And I think that's where that type of game travels, and that's why A&M can play on the road. And all I'm saying is the Corral. Shout out Georgie Ruiz and the social media team there. They got to get up for this one. The students need to be up for this one. They need to be up for the Missouri game too, because if this is an 0-2 week, this team, this program, and dare I say Rodney Terry are in some trouble.
Yeah, and this team rebounding the basketball, they don't really have one guy who can do it like all Buzz Williams teams. They all rebound. They all get after it, and even on the offensive glass. I mean, you look at their team, their leading rebounder is Solomon Washington with 6 boards. And then outside of that, you just got 5 to 6 guys who are in that 4 to 6 range. And that shows that this team can really get after it on the glass. But outside of Washington and Garcia down low, not a ton of their rebounding numbers individually stand out. But this A&M team is a great matchup against Texas because specifically of how they play, how physical they are down low. So Kane Shedrick, he's going to have his mouth full in this one. And this is where, Ryan, we talked about Big Z. You may want to see Big Z get more minutes, but Shedrick down low is going to need help from his guards play too to box out those smaller, frisky Aggies if Texas is going to be able to get a victory. That being said, let's get the corral going. I went to the Tennessee game with Seth, wasn't very active. The UConn game, arguably the second biggest home matchup of the season, kind of a dead environment too. I'm hoping the students show up and show out for this one and even show up tomorrow night against Missouri, even though it's a snow day. So might be tough for a lot of students to come. Some might not have power, Wi-Fi, hot water at home, but hopefully the Moody Center is rocking
Don't speak
this week.
that into existence, Will. We don't need that bad luck for tomorrow.
Sorry about that.
I
Just have to be.
certainly hope not. It's just funny that two of the three of us are like very used to like snow and what it entails being where we're from, and I'm sure you are to an extent too, Will. And then you get here and people don't know how to act. It's crazy.
Yep. So just recapping this A&M game, but you're right. I am not used to the cold. Being from Los Angeles, California, I have a little family in New York, but I tell you, I was outside today in shorts and a hood. And I was fine. I was ready to go. So tomorrow, hopefully, I'll be able to get outside a little bit, get outside the house on a snow day. Hopefully that goes well for me, but you never know. Anyways, this A&M team 2 weeks ago, they out rebounded the Horns 41-31, and they only shot 2 for 19 from three and still were able to get a victory by 20
Do you know how
points.
insane? Do you know how insane that is to go 2 for 19 from three and win a game by 20 points?
And
That's
and
insane.
score 80 points. Yeah, that's
Yeah, score 80. Score
And
80.
by
I
the
mean,
way, it did seem a little bit closer than 20 points. If you guys remember, that Hefner three with about 5 minutes left to give A&M a 13-point lead that was kind of it. And then after that three, Texas was outscored 24-5, including a huge scoring drought in that second half. And as we talked about the Florida game, the 15-0 run they had, we saw the dry spell against Oklahoma. Certain things like that is what the Longhorns are going to need to avoid. Maybe a timeout here from Ronnie Terry, maybe a couple subs, getting some energy guys like Big Z, like Julian Larry, although Larry has struggled. But hopefully Texas can rebound against the Aggies. You guys have anything else on Missouri matchup, on the A&M matchup? Anything
the
else going
A&M
on for the
game,
Horns?
this A&M team, they give me, I know I made the Creighton, Florida comp earlier. I think this A&M team gives me big time Texas Tech freshman year, so 21, 22 vibes. The
oh
whole team seems to, it's like a whole team of junkyard dogs, just hungry, relentless rebounders, physical defenders. It's like the whole team's 6'4" to 6'9". They don't have a monster center. They have one, they have one guard who's 6 feet tall, and the rest of the team's just kind of like that's the height is almost interchangeable, and you can really rotate, play pretty much 2 through 5 with this team, and they're going to go out there. And honestly, you could probably play 1 through 5 when Wade Taylor is not even in the game, but he's in the game most of the time. And they just go out there, and they're going to play balls to the wall. It's going to be a war for 40 minutes. And if you're not ready to go, they're going to make you pay because they attack the glass from 42.9% offensive rebounding percentage, which is fantastic. It's number one in the country. It's phenomenal. And if you're not ready to go, Buzz Williams' teams are always ready. You look at Marquette teams, you look at his teams at Virginia Tech, they are relentless. And so in this SEC, Texas has had a lot of games where we've had lulls for 5 to 10 minutes. Can't have that. You can't have that ever, but especially against a team that'll just kill you on the glass like A&M.
Well, and I just want to piggyback on that. He, especially with the differences between college basketball and the NBA, Buzz Williams is just one of those coaches that is made for college basketball. He will immediately improve any program he's at with just the bare fundamentals. I think the football comp would be something like Vic Fangio. He's going to come in, he's going to get the boys drilled down. Everybody's going to know what their job is, and they're going to play greater than the sum of their parts. And, I know people, many people who went to school in Blacksburg, they remember Buzz Williams, and the program has not been the same since. They have been stuck in the doldrums of the ACC ever since because they went away from some of those principles. And obviously, they didn't fire him. He went for a bigger paycheck at A&M, but um, not a great matchup. I'll we usually throw scores out there at the end for this week's games. I'm going to say that Texas does surprise some and scores a close victory over Mizzou, uh, 74-72. But I think the A&M game will be largely more of the same, like the game in College Station. I think that you can book it. There will be at least a 3 or 4 minute field goal drought from Texas at some point. Speculative shots will go up. ISO ball will be played. Um, 78-64 Aggies.
Seth, predictions for both games coming up this week?
I agree. I think the Mizzou game, they eke it out. I'm going to go 73-71 Horns. And then I think A&M, I think it's a close first half. I think Texas A&M pulls away and we go on one of these lulls. And I think they have Trey Johnson hits a couple crazy shots late, but just not enough to get him over the edge. And I'm going to go Aggies 74, Longhorns 69. I mean, here's the thing about A&M. You go on the road, obviously, I'm sure there will be plenty of Aggies in the building, but defense and rebounding travels. When shots aren't falling, you can always control defense and rebounding, and Buzz Williams teams always bring it.
Yeah, I'm taking Texas to beat Missouri, like you, Seth, in a close one. Texas 77, Missouri 71. On Saturday, I think it's a little bit of a different story. I'd see Texas come in the matchup hyped up, hosting the Aggies might be the best environment that we've seen as to date this season. And they're going to come out firing on all cylinders. And in that second half, see A&M getting on a run, then being able to slow the Longhorns on the offensive end. I'm going a low scoring affair. Aggies 68, Texas 63. So 1-1 week for the Longhorns. Yeah, that's a prediction. To end the podcast, Hop, Seth, and I, we always do Longhorns in the pros, some quick little updates of some of Texas's best basketball players in the NBA, starting with easy money sniper Kevin Durant. He had 36 points, 7 boards, and 5 assists on Saturday in a win over the Detroit Pistons. A little bit different story for the Phoenix Suns today against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And as of 4 days ago, Durant is projected to be an all-star starter for the Western Conference in the NBA All-Star Games, ranking third in that front court voting list behind the Joker and LeBron James. Hop, you want to do our next Longhorn in the pros?
Absolutely. Well, of course, it's he recently got paid. It's our boy Jared Allen. Continues to be that interior force for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who not on my bingo card coming into the year of the league's best record. Could be an all-star. What do we make of that, guys? Could be.
Potentially. Cleveland could have 4 All-Stars. I think they're deserving. On pace with 71 season. He's holding down the fort defensively. He's great against the league best or West Conference best Thunder in a victory a couple weeks ago. Again, different story for them this past Thursday against the Thunder, but it's hard to beat a great team 2 times. So I hope he makes it. He deserves it for a second time. Seth, you got
You got
anything?
Yeah, Miles Turner heading out to Paris. I don't know how much time he's going to have to check out the attractions or play with his Legos because they got a 2 game series with the Spurs. He's quietly averaging around 50% of the field and shooting over 40% from three, which is really impressive for a big man. And but he does need to get the free throw percentage up a little bit more for a 50, 40, 90 season. So
He's
well, hopefully he can get it done.
he's got some work to do. He's shooting around 73% from the free throw line. And last but not least, Jericho Sims. He's not putting up big numbers, but he was starting center for the New York Knicks this past week as they were missing Karl Anthony Towns. He started against the Sixers and the T-Wolves. As I said, he racked up a lot of minutes, did not rack up a lot of points, boards or blocks, but that's okay. It's great to see a fellow Longhorn on the court.
And hopefully back to the college. Hopefully the Horns can get it done moving forward. It's tough to be in this SEC. It's exciting for all sports, but it's pretty crazy when you're playing the ninth best team in the conference and playing them at home, and that's a quad one opportunity. That's pretty nuts.
You was about to say any other final thoughts on Texas basketball headed into the week?
Well, I just think it's crazy that we go through Longhorns with the pros, almost every week, depending on if we have time. And it's almost always, Allen, Turner, Durant. What do these guys all have in common? Even Jericho Sims, they are all at or near 7 foot, and they're difference makers for their teams at the next level. And yet, what does Texas struggle with at the current collegiate level now? Getting a good enough big man to have an anchor inside. We're not even asking for a Durant level stretch four. Like we're not getting greedy here. Just a solid center and the program that hasn't sent a lot of guys from the backcourt to the NBA or even guys on the wing, unless you want to call KD that, you know, is struggling at the position they have produced talent for at the next level, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and we didn't even
Well,
talk about my two Clippers, Mo Bamba and Kai Jones. Also,
There you go.
big man there. And PJ Tucker, he's still in the league. He's not playing for the Clippers. He's trying to get out of Los Angeles, but he's someone that this Longhorns team could use because he could defend outside and inside the paint.
and if you're listening to this and you can play as well as any of the guys you just listed, come on down to the 40 acres,
Yeah.
Yes, come on down to the 48,
especially Kevin Durant.
especially Kevin Durant, but we'll be lucky enough to see Kevin Durant in a month at the Moody Center as they take on the Spurs. Seth Ryan, pleasure talking Texas hoops and SEC hoops with you guys this week. Thank you so much joining us on this Tuesday. Tonight, Texas will face the Missouri Tigers again at 8 p.m. on the SEC Network at the Moody Center. Fingers crossed that the Burn Orange Sports Network will be able to call this one. If not, they'll be able to call Saturday's game against A&M at 1:30 Central Time on Saturday. Thank you so much for having us or for joining us. And please follow the Burn Orange Sports Network on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you, guys.